excited to have Kim Lane joining us today in the Elastic Path environment. Kim is an API evangelist. He's a blogger at kimlane.com. He is a contributor to Programmable Web and all-around expert in APIs. So I'll just leave it to you to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I'm an engineer. I've been building database-driven web applications for about 12 years. I've been working with data for over 20. But in the last 7 years, I've really seen API usage go up. For me personally, but across the industry. So really driving social, really driving cloud computing, and after seeing this, I really wanted to kind of reinvent myself, and I took the opportunity to kind of dive into the space and understand more about how businesses are using APIs, well, the successful ones, the ones we know about, Facebook, Twitter, Google, Amazon, eBay, and really understand how they're using APIs and what they're doing. And I quickly saw that there's enough people talking about the technical side of things, and I wanted to address the business side of APIs and really understand, what does it take to deploy an API, and what kind of business elements do you need to support it? Not just from other departments, but what sort of building blocks do you need to support developers? And so I researched the space, and I just been kind of following all the other leaders and players in the space and talking about it and figuring out what are the best practices, what can I share, and that's why I'm here at Elastic Path, because I feel like you guys are doing innovative things in the space, and they're probably not quite heard about across the industry. So I want to be here and learn more about your guys' e-commerce APIs and share the stories out there in the space. And that's what an API evangelist is someone who just understands one or many APIs, understands its value, and hopefully educates other business leaders as well as developers about the value of that API. And that's what I do.
That's interesting. So you're currently working with a company right now called CityGrid, and so how does that fit into the whole API world?
Yeah, so I do a lot of talking about the best practices of APIs and API evangelism, and what better way than to actually do that for an API for a company, and so that's what CityGrid is. CityGrid approached me last year and wanted me to help them with their API evangelism and their API strategy, and so I helped them figure out how to evolve their API ecosystem, how to market to developers, bring in more developers, as well as understand and cultivate the ones that they already have, and figure out how to provide more value to those developers. So CityGrid is a places API, meaning they have 15 million businesses in the US, and I think they're working on Canada right now. But so they have all this places data, and along with that business data, they serve up advertising, local advertising for mobile and websites. And so they have a really interesting ecosystem in that they provide high value content to developers, but they also help developers monetize their mobile web apps and around that content. And I think that's very important for developers to be successful. They have to make money. They can't just build things on APIs and hope to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. They have to sustain themselves, and CityGrid offers some really great value in that area.
Well, that's really important. I mean, to put the developer hat on when you're developing an API that you want to monetize, to actually think down the line to the success of the developers, because that's ultimately what's going to bring the value of your own API up. So from that perspective, you as a developer with a developer background and fighting for the cause of the developer, what are some of the big mistakes that API creators make that make life difficult for developers?
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the precise reasons why I like to stay external as an API evangelist and contract with companies to help them figure this out, because I'm kind of developer number one. I can come in and start hacking on the APIs and understand where the problems are with onboarding. And first problems I usually see are with API registration, requiring developers to get approval before register for an API. That can really slow down the process. It just slows it down. It's not always an obstacle that can't be overcome. But beyond that, the biggest problems are documentation, poor documentation, not being able to understand how to get going with your API. I'll spend sometimes 4, 6, 8 hours understanding, reading through documentation that's really boring, and then I have to actually write code and figure it out. And I would say that's the number 2 stumbling block, is not providing code samples. You've got to provide quality code samples in as many programming languages as possible. PHP, Python, Ruby, mobile, you got your Objective-C and Java for Android, and really provide as much sample code as possible to help me get up and going. So your documentation needs to be clear, code samples help me get me going, and reduce that onboarding time from 8 hours to 30 minutes. And if I can get up and going using your API in 30 minutes, then the chances that I as a developer are going to be more successful, increase. So that's what I try to do, is help API owners, improve that onboarding process and make it a pleasant experience and easier experience for me.
So it's not just what the API does; it's how you support your users of your
exactly.
API.
But I would say that's the first thing, even before documentation and code samples, is your API has to offer clear value. I shouldn't have to ask what it does. Your API should offer clear value. I should go, oh, I want that, and that's even before I'll be able. Because there's a lot of APIs out there. You're like, I don't know, that isn't really clearly offer value to me as a developer.
So maybe there's a way to, when we talk about whether you're building a product or you're building a platform or whatever it is, to actually take the feedback from the users and actually turn that into the next features. What do you recommend on roadmaps and that kind of thing for crafting the future of your product? How can you start that dialogue with developers and actually get their feedback to?
Well, the essential building blocks for giving developers a voice to be part of that process are, first, a forum. You should have some sort of forum where they can post comments. You should have some sort of email address or somewhere they can get a hold of you and drop you an email or a ticketing system. And you should take all that feedback, aggregate it, and then make decisions on it that can, go back in the roadmap. But that's within your API ecosystem. You should have those building blocks that give developers a voice. But you can't expect developers to voice themselves always within your area. And you should have an active presence on Stack Exchange, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, StumbleUpon, Reddit, Hacker News, all of these channels where developers already are, and they probably already having discussions around your API. Hopefully it's that successful that they, but when they have a problem or hit something, they're not necessarily gonna come to your forum and voice themselves. They're more likely to complain on Twitter or go to Stack Exchange, look for an answer, and then post a post there. So you have to have a presence within your ecosystem as well as outside in the existing ecosystems that give developers a voice, aggregate both of those, and then evangelize that internally. And I think that's, as an API evangelist, I spend equal parts evangelizing externally and evangelizing internally to evolve the roadmap. I'm not just an advocate for the company to get the word out about their API. I'm an advocate for the developers to be heard internally and evolve the roadmap and push it forward.
Right, so there's got to be an inward and outward look.
It's got to be a two-way street, and that's truly an open API, I would say.
Open culture and open technology.
Exactly.
Right. So what about if you are a developer and hey, you're shopping around, you've got all these great APIs, and a lot of them are free, especially in the social world. So in terms of e-commerce, it's really big right now to build open graph timeline apps, integrate Twitter into your customer service, and maybe even into your customer data mining and all that kind of thing. As a business that is using other people's APIs, what are some of the things that you need to look out for, or what are some of the ways that you can protect yourself from maybe that API not being around tomorrow?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of complaints around APIs that they could go away at any moment, they don't care about developers, and they're unstable. And that's true in some cases, but it's kind of true with any business vendor that you have. I mean, if you're a corner sandwich shop where you get your meats and breads and whatnot, you probably should have multiple vendors, because if one of them doesn't deliver one day, what do you do? So you should have a plan A, B, and hopefully a C or D in that equation. But that doesn't always apply, especially when it comes to like Twitter and Facebook, because where else do you go get tweets, and where else do you go get Facebook streams? So those are really difficult to provide a plan B for, but you should hopefully have some sort of caching or some way of dealing with that if Twitter breaks, which it often does, your app doesn't fail, that it still operates and functions. It may not have the most real-time tweets, but hopefully it'll recover and you'll get back to normal. So you should have some sort of kind of failover within your code that, depending on these APIs, and when applicable, have multiple APIs. If it's something like translation, which this happened with Google Translate, they just decided, all of a sudden that they're going to stop supporting it, and then they said, well, wait, we're going to let you pay for it. There's like 40 other translation APIs, so you should have that built into your code where you're using one and then have it fail over to another if it applies, but it doesn't in all those cases. And there's some things we can talk about and how API owners should help alleviate these pain points with the developers. It's not just what the developers can do. There's also it's two sides of the coin. So.
Right. So always plan ahead, be prepared, like a good Boy Scout. Huh?
Yes, exactly. I mean, in any business. I mean, I don't care if you're building around APIs or you're building. You should have failover process, and you should have plan B. So.
And work that all out. Right.
Yeah.
So now social is hot, but what in your mind? Because I'm sure you've seen every single API that's come across your desk. Where's the real opportunity, maybe thinking outside the box of social, that could really build some great new experiences in the e-commerce world?
Yeah, the obvious ones are, with the Twitter fire hose. I mean, in the Facebook stream walls, those streams seem to be the areas where everyone wants to be part of the action. So that's obvious. I would say second to that, is with, what was some of the pioneers in the space. So Flickr was pioneering in APIs, but it's photos, and we've seen that recently with Instagram. Instagram built a very cool iPhone app, and they eventually did an Android, but it had those social hooks where you could take a picture, apply basic filters, and then the social hooks allowed you to go to, Twitter, Flickr, Facebook, and because of those social hooks, it made it, a kind of a viral app, and because of its simplicity. And so photo is an obvious next one. I would say beyond that, I think in the video space we haven't seen it all yet. I think YouTube doesn't embody everything that's going on in the video space. There's a lot of quiet players out there. So I think there's a lot of room for innovation when it comes to APIs and video content, whether it be parts and pieces of videos, transformations on videos, mashing up, splicing in content products, think of television and movies and product placement, and video games along the same lines. So how do you put products, how do you put services, how do you layer in content that potentially could, sell things to its users, viewers. And then beyond video, I'd say gaming is the next, whether it be console gaming or online gaming. I think there's opportunity for because of APIs, for splicing in products and services in there and adding kind of an embedded commerce layer.
And have we, as an online society, is it beyond the point of no return, everything needs to have a social component to it?
No, because there's some things that are just me, but I think the term social isn't as wide as it often is portrayed. I mean, social is my family, it's my friends, it's just between me and my girlfriend. It's between, it could be a much more private, and I think within certain disciplines or domains, it's like I have my social circles within the API space. I mean, my girlfriend gets tired of hearing me talk about APIs. I go to my little social circle of API geeks, so that applies to photography or whatever. So I think there's a lot of verticals and a lot more opportunity to innovate around what is social that isn't just Facebook and Twitter. So I don't think everything has to be social, but I think we need to evolve the term what social means, and it will apply, yes, to a large part of the future of our world. So.
All right. Well, that was great, and I failed to mention that you and your girlfriend have authored a book on the business of APIs. So where can you pick that up?
Amazon. You can get it on the Kindle. Go to Amazon.com and search for Business of APIs, and you'll find it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for dropping by today and sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you.